Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a senior and respected professional from the UK, Toni McLelland. Toni, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Toni is a critical friend and a business mentor. She's the founder of the Compassionate Organization Framework and Leadership Model, and she's a business turnaround and troubleshooting specialist. So, Toni, my first question, tell me a little bit about your own journey and what was the motivation to become a critical friend and a business mentor?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me. And so my own journey, I think it's based on my own traits, my own experience. I've always been that compassionate person, but always, stepping forward in a crisis, the person that is never shy of stepping forward and
Mm,
supporting others, really, always being that listening ear. So I think some of it is about my own traits and my own experience around, people needing that critical friend, because ultimately, when people are in leadership,
mhm.
you know, who do they have
Correct.
that can really tell it as it is and be supportive as well, and help them with their own awareness. So that's kind of really what it is. It's a critical
Mm,
friend, someone who is really, really necessary, critical to your own development and the business, but also, the friend that will be non-judgmental and rational and keeping it real too.
well
So
said.
uh so that's
Well
kind
said.
of a little bit there.
You've also been described as fairy dust personified and the queen of compassion. What does compassion mean to you, especially in a business context?
Well, compassion in a business context is it's all about the people, isn't it?
Correct.
Because, if you think about the leading agendas now, they are all about people and the planet. They are the leading agendas.
Mm,
And so compassion for me is really about the compassionate business,
mm,
the compassionate leader,
mm,
the compassionate business leader that really is putting people and planet
mm,
first at the heart of all their leadership, their business operations. It's putting people at the heart.
mm,
And so a compassionate business, as you marry the two together, it's really about being considerate for and taking positive action for the planet and people.
mm,
So that's kind of where I kind of initially see that as
mm.
yeah.
And
It, it
cor-
it brings in because a lot of the leaders that I work with, they don't really think about the planet. They don't really think about sustainable development, which is the
mm,
direction that we all need to go in,
mm,
really, if
mm,
we're gonna, be a market leader, because that is my role,
correct.
to take people from leaders to business leaders to
Mm,
market leaders and then thought leaders.
amazing.
So
Amazing. Thank you. You were telling me about, how it's a lonely job at the top, and that's where a critical friend comes in. But my question to you, Tony, is what are some of the common challenges C-suite leaders face when it comes to self-reflection and decision making?
wow. Well, when it comes to self-reflection and decision making, some of the problems that I see that they face, although they may not realize that they
Mm,
face, let's put
mm,
it that way, is this whole thing about power and ego. You know, I've seen lots of people being promoted into these roles. They rise up through the ranks, and there's nothing wrong with promoting internally. But if you come from an operational starting point,
mm,
moving into the strategic C-suite role and moving things strategically,
mm,
can be a difficulty. So, really what that for me, it's about understanding the difference between being really good at a skill, being a great people leader, and being good at business acumen. Because
mm.
when you are promoted into C-suite, you may not have seen, a few million pounds in a budget before.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. And, it's the people that, you're in favor with the people. They're the ones that have supported and guided you to that position. but actually you know not very little about business.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Well
so
said.
this is really my role to
Mm.
really get you thinking about what it takes in business, because that's just one part of it,
Correct.
being that people leader. So a little bit of it is about pride, a little bit of it is about ego.
Mm.
There's lots of people chasing the titles,
Mm.
but actually they don't want accountability or responsibility. I was speaking to somebody yesterday about this very thing, that they've got
Mhm.
directors there that don't want accountability and responsibility. And in
Mm.
my world, you know, I've got a civil service background, central government background, and it was
Mm.
all about the Nolan's principles, which is, you know, accountability, selflessness, transparency, all of these qualities that,
Mm.
and I don't think that people are really kind of getting to grips and understanding
Mm.
that. But I
Mm.
say, if you want to become more powerful,
Yeah.
you don't hold on to power.
Mm.
You use your power and you give it away to empower others.
Well
And the
said.
more you give away, the more comes back. The more
Well,
you give,
yeah.
the more comes back.
Correct.
And that's how you become powerful. So power, ego, titles, it's in that area that that there is, that you know
Mm.
the challenges are. And one of the challenges for me, if I can just add, is really about the fact that when I work with these leaders and I'm turning around their businesses, you know, I come in very impartial at that point.
Mm.
And so lots of people will come to me with different things. So I know an awful lot. And, you know, whilst my loyalty is with that person, the
Correct.
chief exec, you know, I've got to be mindful and not careful, but mindful of the timing of what information I'm sharing and how I'm sharing it. Because so that's always a thing with those leaders, how they manage information.
Mm.
You
You know,
know, so
your response gives me an interesting segue to my next question, which is how does a critical friend navigate delicate conversations with leaders while ensuring honesty and accountability?
well, I think that you know, you say delicate conversations, but the way that I see it is, and sometimes people call it difficult conversations,
Mm.
but the way that I see it is I don't frame it as anything delicate or difficult. I just frame it as another conversation, because this
Mm.
is really about building relationships. The more you build those relationships,
Mm.
the easier those conversations become. It's just another conversation.
Mm.
The more you understand that individual, you know how to approach it, the timing of it, and all those other things come into consideration. You
Mm.
know, I know that I can share about my blend model later, but ultimately, I do have a model that helps me to understand that person, and my work, you know, if I can call it work or professional career, has
Mm.
really been around me understanding people as much as I can,
Yeah.
so that I'm able to help to navigate these things. You've got to be really good at listening. You've
Mm.
got to be compassionate. You have to be empathetic. Yeah. And you have to observe, be observant.
Mm. Well said. Um, my next question is, what, in your view, are the hallmarks of a strong leader-mentor relationship, and how do you establish trust in such a relationship?
Well, you've got to listen. You've got the trust comes with credibility
Mm.
and reliability and consistently delivering. You've got to listen, like I
Mm.
said. I think listening is the key one. You've got to pay attention when someone is feeling uncomfortable. You know, you've really got to have that dialogue, build the relationship. And I think the way that I work specifically is I create programs, and I work in a way that is bespoke, you know, so I tailor my work around the characteristics or the traits of the individual.
Mm.
So it's not necessarily, there's so much focus on changing somebody,
Right.
and I don't approach it like that. I
Mm.
approach it that, well, actually, this is the way that will suit them best to get the best results.
Mm.
So you've got to take your time, you've got to go at their pace, and bring them along with you. And yeah, try to engage, look at the points of engagement.
Hmm. When I was reading about you and preparing for my conversation, I was also fascinated to read that you help C-suite executives avoid burnout. Tell me a little bit about how you help them avoid burnout while still holding them accountable for driving business results.
Well, you see, the thing about it is that when it comes to the C-suite executives, quite often, and it links back into what I said earlier on about power and control, they want to know everything, they want to make every single decision. It can't be like that. I once worked with a leader that she wanted to make every decision about everything. And guess what happened? One day she forgot to make a crucial decision and it all came tumbling down.
Hmm.
So I think that there's this piece about delegating, there's this piece about empowering others,
Yeah.
because one of the things I found is that I used to put 80% of my time into my staff.
Hmm.
The staff is my work. They
Correct.
are my work.
Hmm.
And the other 20% is the work that only I can do, because there's no point in trying to hide in your office, sneak in and out, and leaving them to it. You
Hmm.
support them and they will give back, tenfold.
Hmm.
So for me, it's really about, delegation, empowerment. I have a framework which is compassionate C's,
Hmm.
which is community, because Deloitte has their own C's,
Hmm.
yeah, for inclusive leadership, but I have my own compassionate C's, which is communication, community, because you can't do it all alone. And the communication is about the timing of it, when, what, who,
Hmm.
managing that information well.
Hmm.
Um, then there's co-creation, co-production, consultation,
Hmm.
yeah, and all delivered with clarity and consistency,
Hmm.
which brings that connectedness. So
Wow.
compassionate C's, really think about how you can co-produce, bring your stakeholders in, empower your teams, empower your staff, let them be at their best.
Hmm.
Bring out the best. If you bring out the
Yeah.
best in them, then that's the way to, because then if you need a rest, they can take care of things.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know
That's
so
interesting.
so that's the real model to move forward.
Correct.
Invest in your staff, and
Is,
that's
is, is
that's
this also what you call your blend leadership change model? Or
Well,
is that?
no, the blend model is slightly different. So the blend model is about personalization
Hmm.
and really trying to understand that individual. So my career has been in criminal justice, so I really got to understand the behavior, innate taught, learned habitual behaviors, what they look like, because there's so many people that say, Ashutosh, you need to change.
Hmm.
Work like that. So that was the behavior, the B.
Hmm.
Then I went into education because I wanted to understand how people take on board learning,
Hmm.
kinesthetic, audio, and visual learning.
Hmm.
So I put a model together that was based on behavior and learning and went
Hmm.
into organizations. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, because I found that it needs to be bespoke
Hmm.
to the environment. So I went off and I done some work in social care. I was really interested in how young
Hmm.
people in organizations,
Hmm.
in children's homes, how it impacted their learning. So that's the E. So you've got the B for behavior, the L for learning, the E for environment, the
Hmm.
N is for network.
Hmm.
Who's around you influencing you? And my husband will always say, if you hang around a barber's, you will end up getting your hair cut.
Hmm.
Got no hair,
Yeah. Hmm.
will have a close shave.
Hmm.
Yeah. You'll think of something that you want
Yeah.
while you're there. All right. So that's N for network, and D is for your own development, your own self-awareness. How
Hmm.
aware are you? So that's the BLEND model. And so when I work with individuals, I try to identify, is it a behavior that's embedded? Is it the environment that needs to change?
Hmm.
Is it the network that needs to change? And try to loosen up and unpick and untie some
Hmm.
of those. So that's a very personalized approach,
Amazing.
working with that leader
Yeah.
to move them
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. I was reading about it, your blend model, but I didn't realize how powerful an acronym this was. Thank you. You also do work on helping C-suite and board members navigate through individual and business challenges. And I wanted to ask you, um, crisis and change management are integral to future-proofing organizations. What, in your opinion, is the first step leaders must take when they are faced with a crisis?
Breathe.
Hmm. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I know it sounds so obvious, but actually
Yeah.
breathe.
Very
Okay.
well. Yep.
Are you still breathing? Are you still alive? Yes. Well, then
Hmm.
it's okay. Let's go
Hmm.
from there. That's the starting point.
Hmm.
Okay. So stay focused. Stay focused on what you want as the outcome. And I think that sometimes when there's, as a leader, you're taking on all these different things, you're going down all these different rabbit holes that don't matter.
Hmm.
What do you want as the outcome, and how are you
Right.
going to get there as the outcome, and stay focused and bring things back?
Hmm.
Yeah, and then look at it from that perspective. How are you going to get there? Where are you at, and where do you need to get to,
Hmm.
and how long? So really that agile approach,
Hmm.
is needed, where you review things, um, but ultimately stay focused on where you need to get to,
Hmm.
prioritize, you know, your operations or your strategy, really be able to prioritize and
Hmm.
delegate out. So
Well said.
stay focused.
Well said. But the other perspective, Tony, is that most of us as human beings don't like change. We like status quo, or we like status quo ante. What are some of the biggest pitfalls leaders face when managing organization change, and how do you help them?
Okay, so I mentioned my compassionate C's
Yeah.
before.
Hmm.
So if I want to move forward with some change,
Hmm.
why would I want to do that on my own? I need ownership from my teams.
Hmm.
So why not consult with them? They know best in their areas. They know how things work. They know how, what matters to the client. So why wouldn't I want to ask them? Why
Hmm.
wouldn't I want to consult with them? Why
Hmm.
wouldn't I want to bring them on board? Because if I bring them on board and they have ownership, then
Hmm.
that's now one of the things that I really kind of, because I like the RACI model,
Hmm.
RACI, and one of the things that I see very frequently with the RACI model is, the RACI is R for responsible, A for accountable, C for consulted, and I for informed.
Hmm.
And quite often I see that when people do this and they bring other people in,
Hmm.
they don't move towards making a decision,
Hmm.
because ultimately they're accountable for making that decision,
Hmm.
or they are consulting people that need to be informed.
Hmm. Yeah.
They might be informing people that need to be consulted. So, for example, the C-suite might be informing the board when it's the board that's ultimately accountable, so they need to be consulted.
Hmm.
So, really kind of set in the space with who is responsible, who is accountable, and making sure that you're consulting with the right person.
Hmm.
And again, it just depends on the kind of leadership, organizational framework that they're working in, because sometimes projects are managed by different people, etc. So really, um, empower your staff, get them involved, stakeholders as well, clients, get their feedback, get their information, and see, you know, always be looking to improve. And again, the timing. You're going to be too fast for some people and too slow for others.
Hmm.
And
Amazing.
that's where the passionate C's come in.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Communication. Keep people posted.
Hmm. Amazing.
That's really key.
What a great response. Thank you. My next question is, how do you encourage boards and executives to prioritize people agenda without compromising business performance?
Well, I shouldn't have to encourage, because ultimately, you know, the leading agendas are
Hmm.
environmental, social, and governance,
Hmm.
ESG,
Yeah.
DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging,
Hmm.
CSR, corporate social responsibility, and SDG, sustainable development goals.
Correct.
And they all are about people as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the ESG, is the S in there is social, CSR, S for social.
Yep. Mm,
S in sustainable development is sustainable. So really, the
mm,
message is there. You can't get away from it. If you are to succeed
mm,
in business and future-proof moving forwards, you can't run away. You
mm,
can't run away. I was doing some work around some tendering recently, and all of the questions were around corporate social
mm,
responsibility. What are you doing for the environment? How are you protecting people's information? How are you protecting their data?
mm,
This is what is key. Social impact. What is the impact you have to have your social impact statement.
mm,
And I'm finding that a lot of the boards and people that I'm speaking to are not even aware of sustainable development goals
mm.
and how they relate.
Correct. Correct.
So for me, you can't get away from people, you can't get away from sustainability. And if you want to be a market leader, we are in 2025. By 2030, we should have these things in place for the sustainable
Yeah.
development. Whether it happens in time or not is a different matter.
Mm,
But why not be 5 years ahead of your competitor?
mm. Well
Why
said.
not?
Well said. Well said. So I have time for two more questions for you. My
Sure.
next question is, Tony, you have deep experience with vulnerable groups. How does that influence the way you approach social causes within business strategy?
Okay. Well, vulnerable groups. That's how my journey with compassion started. Because when I was working with young people in the criminal justice system
Mm,
on the ground, compassion kept me safe.
mm,
When I was in the community dealing with critical incidents,
mm,
it brought calm and resolve.
mm,
When I'm leading huge staff teams, it brings, productivity and effectiveness.
mm.
It
Okay.
was a winner all the way through. So
Mm,
why would you not want to apply that in business? And that's why we've come full circle with our conversation, because that's how you become a compassionate business.
absolutely.
You add you if you consider the planet and people,
Mm,
then you are moving in that right direction and you are potentially going to become a B Corp. But
mm,
you've got to really
mm.
look at people, invest in them.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I would say on that is I have a quote, and that is about, well, I have several, but it's a distinction that I want your listeners to hear. And that is about making sure that you understand the difference between what is important for a person and what is important to a person.
Mm,
They're both very different.
absolutely.
So when you're working with a leader in an organization, what's important for the organization is one thing, but what's important to the organization could be very different. And if you really want to get to the sweet spots, think about the two pieces. And again, that answers your other question that you asked me previously about building trust. Understand what's important to
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
so that's really key. And working in those kind of environments with vulnerable groups has really taught me, you know another one that I say is count the smiles and the KPIs take care of themselves, because ultimately, being around people that are non-verbal as well, if they are smiling, you know that you're going in the right direction. So for me, compassion and bringing those people centered approaches is really key.
Well said. And my last question for you, Tony. If there was one bit of fairy dust you could sprinkle over every boardroom, what would it be and why?
Well, I would say that, first of all, can I just say that my fairy dust is like glitter.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you have glitter and you sprinkle some glitter, and you might see it in a few years' time, there's still be
Yes.
little bits of glitter sparkling. So
Yeah.
think about my fairy dust in that way.
Mm,
Even though when people ask me about fairy dust, I say it's not to be described, it's to be experienced.
mm,
Okay? And it's I would say, really, if you're a board, get behind the Sustainable Development Goals. In Wales,
yeah.
they have the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, so it's slightly different, but really get behind that. If you want to be futuristic, if you want to be a future leader, if you want to future proof
Mm,
your organization, that's where you need to be. And with those leading agendas that I mentioned earlier on, ESG, DEIB, SDG, and CSR, Yeah. They're all about people, and that's really where you want to be. If you want to become moving from a leader to a business leader to a market leader and then a thought leader.
Amazing. And on that note, Toni, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. We covered a lot of ground on critical friend. You told us what a critical friend is, what the role is. We spoke to us about common challenges of C-suite leaders. Uh, you also spoke about how a critical friend could navigate delicate conversations. You talked to me about your multiple C's, different kinds of C's. You also talked to me about the BLEND leadership change model. Then we spoke a little bit about crisis and change management, about prioritizing people agenda, and finally your words of wisdom when you sprinkled some of your fairy dust on so many different boardrooms. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.